This lesson would fall within the introductory phase of a unit about fractions. It's exploring halves, quarters and eighths as common fractions that kids need to know before moving on to grade 3. They're investigating common fractions in realistic situations, so they're going to be using resources that they're familiar with, so cooking instruments. So there's measuring cups, measuring spoons and a bucket of water, and that'll help them to establish the relationship between different fractions as part of the whole as well. The introductory phase of this lesson will be based on making a KWL chart. The purpose of that is for diagnostic assessment, so you get a chance to find out what the kids know and what they want to know about the topic of fractions. It'll also give you a good chance to discuss what experiences they have had with common fractions, so where they use them in their daily lives, like in cutting fruit in half and just familiar terms that they have. Pedagogical practices that are really important in this phase is the questioning. So teacher questioning is really imperative to make sure that the KWL chart is purposeful and not just kids' loose suggestions that they're not quite sure of. So questioning that's going to be used mainly is, what is a half? Where have you seen the term half used? Can I have half of a group of things? So that gives them a chance to find out if they know that half can be either of a collection or of a whole item. How do I know if something is halved? So that's knowing whether just that halves need to be 2 equal halves. They can't be 2 and 6 and that's half. So is there a difference between half and quarter? How many quarters in a whole? So these questions will help to extend children's answer and make them think a bit more critically about their understandings. This is a key tool that we use in the introductory section of this lesson, the KWL chart. Obviously in a classroom, in a group discussion situation, be in a much larger scale, so on the interactive whiteboard. So you have what you know, what you want to find out and what you've learnt. So there's a way of establishing prior knowledge, establishing some direction for investigation and for reflection. Know what a half is?
Yes.
Yes, and what are some of the features of a half? What makes something a half?
2 parts that are equal.
Yeah, and how do you know if something has been halved? Is it always of one whole object, or can it be of a collection of things?
A collection of things.
So if I have 10 grapes, can I split that in half?
Yep.
Yep. So we can have collections. And what about a quarter? Have you ever heard of a quarter?
I think so.
Yeah, and do you know how many parts of a whole quarters are?
No.
Okay, so that's something we need to find out. So quarters. And what about eighths?
No.
No. And where do you hear the word half being used?
When you're sharing
Yeah.
with other people,
Yeah.
you might have half inch of a banana.
Yep. In here? Not sure.
Not sure.
Yeah, that's good. So we need to think about some other places that we see halves. The body of this lesson will be based on recipes. They're going to look at a recipe and break it down into the common fractions. So the recipe already involves a lot of instructions and measurements that involve half cups, half a teaspoon, half a tablespoon and things like that. This will help them to become really familiar with those measurements in a way that relates to them. They'll complete a table, a worksheet table that allows them to explore how many of each measurement fit into the larger body. So with the whole cup, they need to find out how many quarter cups you need to fill a whole cup. So then they're understanding the correlation between the parts of the whole. Questioning is going to be really important in this as well when you're monitoring individual student work, just to make sure they're understanding what they're doing and not just filling it out on a really superficial basis. So the questions will be things like, can you see any fractions or fraction language in this recipe? What do we use to measure out these amounts? How do we know which measuring instrument is the best to use? How many half cups are in a full cup? And just going off what the students' responses are to extend their knowledge and make sure they have good conceptual understanding. And when you're done finishing the sheet, when they're finished filling out the sheet, you need to discuss it as a class to make sure everyone is on the same page of understanding. Have you ever seen any of these before?
Yeah.
Do you know what they're called?
No.
Not sure? Okay, so this one here is called a cup. So that's one whole cup. Do you know what we use these instruments for?
Cooking.
Always cooking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a whole cup. What do you think this one might be?
Half.
Half a cup. What about this one?
Not
sure. This one's called a quarter of a cup. Alright, and what about these? Have you seen these before?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you know what these ones might be called?
No.
Okay. This one here is the smallest one, and it's called something similar to this.
A
Do you have
quarter.
any ideas? That's a quarter of a teaspoon. And the next one up from that is similar to the name of this one. What do you think it might be?
A half.
A half. And what about this one? That's the biggest
One.
teaspoon. Okay, so where do you find these different instruments used? What tells us that we need to use these?
Cooking book.
A cooking book, so a recipe. So in a recipe, it might tell us that we need to use half a cup of flour. So which one of all of these would you use to find half a cup of flour? That one? Is there any of the other ones that you could use to make half a cup of flour?
Not sure.
Not sure? Okay, we're going to do a little investigation and find out if there's any other ways that you can make half a cup without just using this one. Okay, the assessment piece of this lesson will be filling out this sheet successfully, the worksheet for the first activity. These spaces here are blank, this is a filled in copy. So the kids need to use the equipment that's provided for them and their own investigation choices to decide for a quarter cup, how many quarter cups are needed to make one whole cup. So they need to find out that 4 quarter cups is equivalent to 1 whole cup and 3 third of a cups are needed to make 1 whole cup. So that's just helping them to see the equivalence between some fractions and the relationship between a quarter and a whole and a half and a whole, and in a way that is realistic and accessible to them. So it's in a familiar situation and circumstance, so the context is more meaningful so it can sink in a bit better. There's a secondary part of assessment. At the end of this lesson they're going to be making or following a biscuit recipe, and in the recipe it's got a lot of fraction terminology, so they need to use what they've learnt from the worksheet and the prior activity to follow the recipe properly to make the final product. So being able to see that they can make the final product successfully is a demonstration of what they've learnt from the lesson. So can you tell me how many halves are in 1 cup?
2.
2? How do you know that?
Can I show you?
Yep.
So that's 1 cup.
Yep.
So if I fill the 1 cup up and tip it into the half a cup, that's 1/2 a cup.
Okay.
And that's 2 half cups.
So there's 2 half cups in 1 whole cup.
Yes.
What about how many quarter cups are in 1 whole cup? You know?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you show me how many?
4. So can I go this way?
Yeah.
So I can put 1/4. 3. And
4.
and a little bit.
Okay, so there's 4 quarter cups in 1 cup.
Yes.
So if you had to make 3/4 of a cup, some ways that you could put this into practice in assessing the making of the recipe is really questioning them as they're making the recipe. So that means as they're using a half cup, reading the recipe, you could say things like, you have a half cup, is there any other tool you could use to make half a cup other than using the actual half cup? So that'll make them think critically about what they know about what goes into a half, so the equivalent fractions there. So as they're doing it, just questioning, so does the cup have to be full completely, or can it be heaped over or have less in it? When they put it in, just make sure you just keep asking them questions as they're making the recipe, so just double checking that they know what they're doing. So can you put more, can you put less, is that a half? Yeah, just a lot of questioning just to make sure that the concept is really grounded in there. Conclusion of this lesson, we'll just be meeting back as a class on the Capital area and reviewing the KWL chart that was made in the introductory section of the lesson. There will be some reflection questions that are important for the teacher to ask. So, does half only apply if it's one solid object? How many halves are in a whole? How many quarters in a whole? How many eighths are in a whole? Is a half always the same size? And have we discovered anything new about common fractions today? And that'll just help the children to review and reflect on what they've learned for the day, to concrete some more of those conceptual ideas and discuss some misconceptions they might have had or anything that they still feel they're not quite sure about. Okay, so after our investigation today, did we find out what a quarter is?
Yes.
Yep, so how many parts of a whole is a quarter? How many quarters are in one whole?
4.
4? Is it always 4?
Yes.
Alright, and did we use halves in any ways that we use it in our daily lives? How did we find out about halves?
We put half a cup in a cup.
Yep, so using cooking instruments?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and was the water a whole or was it a group of things?
No, just one
Just
cup.
one
just
body?
a whole one.
Yeah, okay, and what about, did we find out if you can have different sizes? When you have something, can it be 2 different sizes? Or is it always the same?
Oh no, the 2 halves are always the same.
Is that the same with quarters?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.